are of direct interest to our workshop group. So we have with us Dr. Su-Seong Lim and Karen Lips. And I would like to kick off by asking Dr. Lim if she would like to present her perspective coming from the Science of Learning and Augmented Intelligence program, which is one of the groups, actually, the main group, which is responsible for bringing us here today. So our funding comes from Dr. Lim's program. And I thought she could tell us a little bit about the program in a bigger context.
So thank you, Rob. But first, before I start talking about the program, let me just get things set up here. First, to the organizers of this workshop, Robert Goldster, Marta Gelasek, Gautam Biswas, and Marina Dubova. And to the speakers, a very big thank you for the series of stimulating talks and perspectives about augmented intelligence. And to all of you who have participated throughout, thank you for your thoughtful questions and comments, which have enriched greatly the discussions that we've had. This is an important workshop for the program. Your ideas and perspectives will help shape the priorities of the program in planning for the future. I also look forward to the discussions and reports and perspectives and publications that you are preparing, that some of you are preparing, to further distill and to synthesize the discussions that you've had so that they can be shared more broadly beyond this workshop and be a resource for people who are interested in this topic. The format of the workshop has been an experimental one, and from my perspective, it appears to be successful and productive. So congratulations to the organizers. And I thank you again for the work that you have done and the commitment and stamina you have displayed to make this phase of the workshop a success. So thank you. Next, I would like to move on to a brief introduction of the Science of Learning and Augmented Intelligence program. And with that, I think this is always where I could mess up. Let me see, I'll share screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Marina, can I send you, do you want me to send you the slides, or how should we do this?
Okay, I think now it's solved.
Okay, can I share screen now? Okay. Can you see?
Yes, we can.
The slides. And is it? I guess so. All right. It's so you can see the slides then, right?
Yes.
So the Science of Learning. Let me do this here. Okay, the Science of Learning and Augmented Intelligence program supports basic research to advance theory building and fundamental knowledge about principles, processes, and mechanisms that pertain to learning and to augmented intelligence. We are interested in learning in humans, other animals, and in machines, and we construe augmented intelligence broadly as that which pertains to how human cognitive function can be augmented through interactions with others, human others, through interactions with technology and through a variety of contextual variations involving the two. The science of learning component of the program has a much longer history through earlier NSF investments. The addition of the augmented intelligence priority makes more explicit the program's interest in the study of learning, not only in individuals, but also in groups. These investigations span a wide range of disciplinary domains and levels of analysis to include the molecular and cellular basis of learning, brain systems of learning, behavioral and cognitive aspects of learning.
It's not moving.
I'm still on this. Of learning.
Your slides aren't moving. You're not in presenter mode. I think you think the slides are moving and they're not.
Oh, okay. They're not.
Yeah.
It looks to me, is it on?
It's not in presenter mode. It's in the other mode. So yeah.
How do I fix? I don't know why that is here, right? Okay, let me see.
You could either put it in presenter mode, or you could just click on slide that you want to show. You could just click on the third slide.
So that was the first slide there, right?
Okay.
And this is the second slide. Is it moving?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Do you see the second slide? Are we still on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are seeing it.
That's the second slide.
Yeah, it just has the same
slide. Right.
first.
Okay.
It has the same title.
Yes.
You could just use the slideshow mode, I think, too.
No, I can't see. I've lost the slideshow. I can't see where that.
The slides have the same title, but the text.
Yeah,
I think we see them. We see them.
Okay, you see them, right? Somehow I've lost I don't know where I know what you're talking about, but I can't see the access on it. But let's quickly go through this. So the portfolio includes all aspects of these topics through molecular cellular basis of learning, brain systems of learning, behavior and cognitive aspects of learning, social and cultural influences on learning, learning of individuals, of groups and organizations. So in addition to biological systems of learning, our portfolio also includes learning in artificial systems. We're particularly interested in how biological systems can inform advances in AI and technology. And we have an equal interest in trying to understand how the use of these technologies can also offer insights into human learning. So we particularly encourage proposals for the program that converge on and integrate across disciplinary levels of analysis in ways that will create new and novel groundwork for conceptualization, experimentation, or explanation, with the purpose that these foundations will then anchor new lines of inquiry and thinking about learning and augmented intelligence. So for the website lists a number of possible topics. The program's interests are not limited to these alone, and we welcome your ideas, especially those related to collaborative and collective models of learning and/or intelligence. Now, these would include emphasis on how people and technology working together in new ways and at scale can achieve more than either one can attain alone, And we also seek explanations, the program seeks explanations for how the emergent intelligence of groups, organizations, and networks intersects with processes of learning, behavior, and cognition in individuals. So why this workshop on augmented intelligence? And I want to refer this articulation from the proposal that Rob submitted to the program, in saying that people rarely solve problems or develop understanding on their own. They recruit and learn from other people and use technologies and tools to help them. However, much of cognitive science has been traditionally focused on the individual as the basic unit of cognition, and there is a lack of a general framework for understanding the external group dynamics that influences individuals to shape their cognition, decision-making, and problem-solving. So the goals of this topic is very timely, and I hope that this workshop and the continued interest from all of you will fill important gaps in knowledge that have, to us, become increasingly apparent and urgent. For example, the fast pace of technological advances have enabled the new contexts of social interactions through online connections that are changing at very fast speed and scale, how individuals and groups interact and influence each other. And we have many examples of some of these issues that have emerged throughout many of the talks that we've had. A primary goal of the workshop, okay, sorry about that. A primary goal of the workshop is to engage researchers from diverse disciplines in the framing of important questions about augmented intelligence that could drive future directions. We see the workshop as a venue to bring together and build a critical mass of interdisciplinary researchers who are interested in generating new ideas and pursuing some of these research ideas. We also recognize that the kind of integration that we're seeking takes time. The challenge then is how to build the work that the workshop has already started, and in ways that will maintain and grow the convergence of people, the ideas that were presented, and the tools that you might share. So it is for this reason that I want to now turn to my colleague, Karen Lips, who leads the ExcelNet program at the NSF, with the hopes that some of you may consider application to this program to sort of leverage the broader expertise base that are already present in this workshop to generate new synergies in research and cross-pollination of ideas, and to share resources and enhance capacity of students and junior investigators to engage in interdisciplinary research in this, I think, very exciting emerging area. So, Karen, how do I get unshare? Or perhaps stop share here.
Hello, I'll just introduce myself then. As Su-Xiang said, my name is Karen Lips. I'm a rotator in the international office at NSF, and I am currently leading the ExcelNet program. And Su-Xiang is on our coordinating committee that has representatives from across all the directorates at NSF to sort of evaluate, inform, and help direct the direction of this relatively new program. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spend a very short amount of time giving you a very brief overview of what this program is and given her introduction, I hope you'll sort of see some of the opportunities that this program might offer you as you decide whether to move forward and how you might do so. I've put into the chat the link to our website. The website's got a variety of resources. We're in the process. We've got a deadline coming up in October, and so we've been holding office hours. We have a webinar posted there that you can watch and hear some of the typical questions that we get, as well as see some historic resources and see what's been funded in the past. But many of the things that Susiang just went through, I think, will resonate with those of you who know anything about this program. ExcelNet is essentially it's an international coordination and planning grant. It's less about the research and it's more about bringing a network of networks together to discuss how these existing networks, these developing networks, might come together and explore ways to generate new ideas around research in areas that are developing. So for example, in your case, there may be networks that you all represent with international components where the ExcelNet program would fund you to meet, discuss, develop, a roadmap for your future research, identify what needs to happen next. And so it's mostly about coordination and planning, training of early career researchers, bringing people together to really decide, what are the next steps for a group such as yourselves in deciding what to do next. A lot of focus on team science, collaboration, coordination. We have it sort of set up so that our awardees join the overall group of cohorts that have already been funded. We have a contractor then who meets with them both as a team and as the full group to really have them share their experiences with international network collaborations so that, as this field is developing itself, best practices are shared and teams learn from each other. So I will end there. I will encourage you to visit our website, reach out to myself, Susiang, or some of our other program officers. We'd love to talk to you more if you have questions. And if you have questions now, if there's time, I'd be glad to answer a few here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, both Susiang and Karen. Are there questions that people have about these programs before we dig into the event of self-organizing ourselves into themes? Yeah.
So one thing that I want to sort of emphasize with regard to what Karen just said is that although the ExcelNet applications, the ExcelNet awards are not for the actual conduct of research itself. The scientific motivations for why you want to get together as as a network of networks is vital to the competitiveness of the of your application. So the work that you're going to be doing today in thinking about sort of the coordinating overarching themes and shared interests scientifically and otherwise in terms of training of students, that is a very important aspect of the application. And I cannot emphasize that enough. We often get a lot of applications that come in with very nice coordination of efforts, but without a central vision of what might be accomplished through this congregation and coordination effort.
Great, absolutely. So I'd like to transition us to something that Dr. Lim mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, which was that there are going to be these rapporteur reports coming out of this workshop. And we are currently at the sort of the breathing point halfway between the first set of talks and the second set of talks. So this is not the end. This is just the end of the first semester of our academic year, which will be for us ending in December rather than May. So there is going to be another set of talks starting up as early as next week, I believe. Right, Marina? And so one of our activities is trying to figure out how we should be dividing the many great presentations that we've heard into underlying motifs or themes. And we have already supplied some, Marina has put on the Jamboard link that she said. There are some themes that we've identified, but we'd love to hear from you as well about connections between talks that have been resonant to you or things that you feel should be within the purview of augmented intelligence that we have not yet articulated. So I don't know before I open it up, are there things that Myrta or Marina or Gautam would like to add to this? Okay, well, so if you have or have not looked at the Jamboard page, you can go there now if you want to get some idea of some of the themes that we've been noticing from the talks. And this is somewhat by design because we voted on who we wanted to hear from. And so we've had our own biases, as many of you have talked about, in our choices. So the speakers that have been presenting to us have been organized according to themes in our mind, but we've also been surprised at sort of meta themes that have come out as a result of the interactions among these talks. One of the things that I've been interested in is seeing differences in the talks in terms of the focus on what I might consider the network structure of the talks or of the groups, a little bit along the lines of what Karen Lips was talking about, the networks and the networks of networks, versus other talks have been, I think, drilling down on the process of coordination, like the dynamical systems and in Michael Richardson's talks, the specifics of pheromone trails in Deb Gordon's talk, how Cousins was talking about fish having faces and the presence of their faces influencing who's going to influence them. So it's an interesting, different of approaches that I feel like I've been seeing, where there is a sort of a higher level approach where people are interested in network structures and applying network analysis versus people very interested in the what I would consider the ecosystem, the local ecosystem of the organism and the specifics of their bodies and the dynamical interactions among them. And so that is, just throwing it out there, one example of a kind of a theme or paired themes that I feel organizes several of the talks interestingly to me.
Gabriella, do you want to jump in?
Oh, thanks, Kylie. And hello again. One of the things, and I appreciate what you were saying, Rob, about the organization of the networking. And the thing that jumped out to me a lot was the human-computer augmentation and interaction through a lot of the themes that were presented. So we started out with Dr. Frey and the gaming examples, and then we had another one of those. But then we kind of moved a little bit more into that with Dr. Richardson, and I think again with was it Dr. Stevers? But a lot of them kind of overlap with that human computer interaction and supplementation of actions. Dr. Galasik as well, even though it was a little bit different, I appreciated how the research was looking at ways that AI could fill in some of the gaps to supplement, not necessarily replace, and what that looks like and what that means. And then the other theme for me was just how technology has sort of created, I don't have a better term than contagion for social interaction and cognition, and how we see that and recognize it and what it means as a society. So Dr. Lewandowski's talk was really good for me in that area. We had a lot of discussion with that, and the social aspect and impacts of the technology and how it's targeted and how it's deployed was another area that was really ringing true for me. I would love to see more of what Dr. Pepler presented, which is the use of the technology in education, because there are big impacts and big gaps in deploying the technology in education here in the United States. So who has access to it, how dated it is, how robust it is, and things of that nature. And just seeing the difference in, fatigue, looking at how we can reduce that so that the technology is effective, but also easily adopted by staff and students. I would love to see some more of that in the future if possible.
Following up on one thing that Gabriela was mentioning on this very strong dominant theme of how computers and humans should be getting along with each other, if you will, how they should be combined. And I mean, I'm looking at Mark Stivers and Gautam and Jerry Zhu's talk last week. It seems like there's an interesting distinction between some set of talks, which I was parsing in my head as having to do with machines being used to make people make better decisions. So it's a kind of going along with the idea that the human is still the cognitive unit, and they can be supported or improved in terms of their performance by getting advice, by getting nudges, as Dr. Zhu was talking last week, from the computer. And there's also a different kind of view where you might think of the cognitive unit actually not being at the human level, but actually being at the system level, where the computer and the human are just both, in a sense, cogs within a bigger system. So some of the talks that go along with that second route, I think, might be like Deborah Gordon's talk and Ian Cousins' talk, where you don't get the feeling that like the individual ant or zebrafish is really the fundamental unit of cognition. It really is the colony, the aggregation. And so that's it. I mean, I think it's not a case where one of these perspectives is the right one, but it is an interesting difference, I think, in overview. Yeah, jump in, Sudhi.
Yeah, no, really interesting points, and kind of related to that. One question that came to my mind was the degree to which we need models of the individual's underlying cognitive processes to build, sophisticated systems, or whether you can kind of get away without actually specifying what goes on in a decision maker or an individual's mind. I think there's probably some variance in that. across the talks. As a cognitive scientist, obviously, I'm more interested in models of individual cognition. And I think that knowing more about those models can provide theoretically driven insights about where to intervene in human cognition and decision making. But that may not be true, and that may not be practically convenient either.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, going along on the other side, there's a glorious history in statistical physics of applying their models to the dissemination of the opinions and beliefs and behaviors in groups. And that is kind of in many ways, it's kind of the opposite of what Sudeep was arguing, because you can have very, very simple cognitive processes because you're using these same models to apply to like the shift of magnetic spins in molecules as you are for belief change. And so I think it's interesting to know what is going to be the benefits of having those relatively simple, pure mathematical treatments compared to the more rich engagement in the cognitive processes. I guess actually Mircea is the perfect person to comment on that, because she's been involved in modeling on both sides of that.
It's difficult, but yes, I completely agree with, I agree with both. Sudeep, it seems that we need at least some simplified model of human cognition to be able to know how individuals affect collectives and the other way around. But I wanted to add two additional points. We are talking always about augmented intelligence, but one could also think of the flip side, or diminished intelligence, because of collective processes. And Phil Metzner was talking about it, Ulrike Hahn a little bit, David Deng. So it seems like this is also a topic. How, not only how the technology and social networks augment intelligence, but how can they lead to maybe unwanted outcomes, and how can we maybe predict that, prevent that. And the other theme, also, we are talking about cognition, cognitive processes, and somehow emotions and group emotions are always somewhere on the side. They're almost a little bit obscene. We don't have really good models. Most of our cognitive scientists are not dealing with emotions, but they are so important, obviously. A lot of collective behavior is driven by pure emotion. And Amit Goldenberg was talking about it. David Garcia, I suppose, will also talk about that. But it seems like a really an area of research that very much needed. Are the group level emotions different than individual emotions? How they occur? How can they be instigated? How they foster or prevent intelligent, more core cognition, intelligent behavior, and so on. So my 2 points.
So I would like to add something to what you said, Rob, which is this notion of augmented intelligence in learning environments. You talked about, cognitive processes in the humans that are learning. It could be individuals or small groups, but also about cognitive processes within the system itself. So I don't know if you'd call it cognitive processes within the system, but there is this element, especially if you're talking about intelligence in the system, where the system is trying to interpret or understand the actions that the human are doing in a particular environment that the system has created. And in a sense, the whole challenge of intelligence is how do you adapt, right? Because your goal is to get, in this case, get the humans to develop their cognitive processes and learn in that particular instance, but also in more general. And so that brings up this notion of self-regulated learning or shared regulation, which involves looking at multiple processes simultaneously because they interact with each other: the cognitive, metacognitive, the affective, and sometimes even the motivational aspects. And in group work, it also then includes these things as they relate to the people in the particular group. So I was wondering, how within our framework we can incorporate some ideas of this kind, especially when you're thinking of learning environments where you have a goal of trying to, train the humans to get better at what they're doing, whether it's a task or whether it's some, learning topic that you're trying to get across to them.
Yeah, I mean, in an educational context, I think it oftentimes is assumed, or at least it was assumed 20 years ago, that the end goal is to make the students smarter and self-sufficient so that they can go off on their own. And after you take them away from their algebra tutoring system, after you take them away from their Mathematica or MATLAB application, then they'll have a better mastery of algebra or mathematics, as it would be shown, for example, on high-stakes standardized tests, where you no longer have Mathematica in your pocket. And I feel like there is another view where that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and that a lot of intelligence is using these tools that you can reliably know are going to be in your pocket or surrounding you. I'm thinking of like architects who are using CAD CAM software in an extremely sophisticated way. And it's not like they would be able to go back and sketch well without that CAD software. And it's not considered a problem that they are now wed to their particular software. And, and I have a symbiotic relationship with R now as a result of using it so much. And I can't think very well about statistics without having that as a language and as an IDE. I wouldn't go so far as to say that you never want self-sufficiency in the student, because there's this notion that's in a lot of Murtaugh's recent work of adaptive intelligence, rather than just thinking of collective intelligence, which oftentimes suggests there's like one particular goal. There's also this idea of being able to adapt to new situations. And maybe that is one of the background reasons why we are trying to create learners that aren't completely dependent upon their cyber infrastructure around them.
No, I agree. I fully agree with you, right? So some of the aspects of these learning environments is to get students familiar with tools, right, in problem solving, so that even outside of the environment, then they can use those tools for solving other problems. So that's a great point.
I may be out of place here, but I'm going to try to jump in just a little bit, because I haven't heard this come up yet. I am interested very much in collaborative writing environments in the classroom and co-writing papers that are read to a class and this kind of thing. I've done this about 10 times, but never in a scientific context. So it was always done as a pedagogical experiment, but not as a data collecting experiment, though with Google Docs and what have you, I have an incredible amount of data from these things. But Rob, to a point you were making that I think is interesting, regards authorship, collective authorship, and even disagreement of authors about their conclusions in papers. So I suspect somebody here is probably more familiar than I am with the consensus paper in paleontology, where 4 leading paleontologists wrote a paper that none of them agreed with. And it turned out when the evidence came in, the paper was right. And I'm very intrigued by these kind of dynamics as they play out individually in the classroom, and then as they play out across whole professions. So I've noticed, for instance, that the dialogue that pertains in the philosophy of science is a really careful game in which every author is moving one piece on a big board. And it's really highly structured, co-learning kind of, co-investigating kind of model. That's not the model that's used in ethics, for instance. And so because I haven't heard it come up about collaborative writing and not much about idea generation, there's been a little bit, I think Jerry's talk was a little bit about idea generation, that I'm curious about where the workshop could go in terms of lateralizing cooperative minds in novel idea generation. And by the way, any advice anybody has to me about how a humanist who has done this in the classroom but has not collected social science data might turn these things into workable scientific experiments would be helpful too for me.
And this seems like a question where collaboration with people who work on education technologies would be very useful, right? I don't know, Danielle, maybe you have some ideas. Others who are working on these, how to promote this kind of creative lateral discussion in classrooms. Are there such tools that are used in schools? The mute.
Sorry, I missed the question. Are there tools that are being used in classrooms to promote discussion?
To promote this lateral thinking, idea generation, so they do not just help to solve a specific problem with optimal solution, as I understood Tony, but they promote the idea generation, innovation.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a great deal of research on that. I mean, there's obviously we have discussion boards, and there's a great deal of research on that, on the language in the discussion boards, and then discussion board use and the impact that they have. I don't believe there's much in terms of creativity, and also discussion boards are not used very much. And the language that is used is sometimes not very extensive or elaborative. So it's not really a tool that promotes that kind of thing as naturally. But I mean, for example, we're using a tool right now, Jamboard, that is pretty perfect for this kind of thing. I do not know that it's being used in classrooms very often. I think it's pretty hard to moderate and for a teacher to come in and use a Jamboard. I think that would be a big ask. And there's not much that I know of that is automated in terms of doing that. There are, there's lots of research on inducing collaborative work and, tables and all sorts of things like that. I think that one of the things, I guess the points I would make in terms of inducing collaboration between kids would be somewhat along the lines of what I was talking about in my talk, and that is just not to forget the whole picture of the skills that the student needs to bring in order to be collaborative and creative. But I think this is an open field. It's a big question and something that has, a lot of people need to tackle.
Thank you.
So Tony, if I could just ask you, are you aware of the NSF's RETL program? It's research on emerging technologies for learning and teaching, for emerging technologies for teaching and learning. And you might want to scroll through some of the awards made by that program, because there are platforms that were that have been funded for sort of co-creation of knowledge for some of the various aspects of what you are looking for in terms of the work, sort of co-writing, the writing platforms too.
Where was that to look?
Look at the NSF website. It's called RETTL, RETL program, Research on Emerging Technologies for Learning and Teaching.
Excellent, thank you.
And look under awards. There might be awards that might be relevant to things that you are looking for.
Thank you.
recall seeing some research after the pandemic started on looking at interactions in online contexts like in Zoom. And I think there's a real opportunity to look at kind of the multimodal transactions between learners and facilitators of learning, using things like using Zoom plus Jamboard and using some standards like XAPI, Experience API, to capture the data of the click stream and to observe what kinds of behaviors students have that are conducive to certain outcomes.
Am I next? So actually, this is in response to both Jim and Tony, their point about co-writing. And I just want to put on the table a kind of data set that I find pretty remarkable with respect to very expert level co-writing. And this is the Polymath Project by Tim Gowers. Are people familiar with that? It's a way of groups of mathematicians and large groups oftentimes, of mathematicians to solve problems that are too big for a small group, such as one mathematician. So much of mathematics has been done by single mathematicians working with paper and pencil or on chalk and chalkboard in their offices. And there's been a number of just amazing benefits from the Polymath Project. I guess the most well-known is the Bounded Gap Theorem, right? So we don't know whether there's an infinite number of prime numbers that differ by exactly 2. That's a conjecture, but we know that there's an infinite number of prime numbers that differ by some number less than 70 million. And that was proved several years ago. And that was then turned into this Polymath project where people tried to reduce that bound from 70 million, maybe eventually down to 2. And we haven't gotten there collectively as a species, but it's just remarkable to see the reduction, and so it's just decreasing, sometimes day by day. And I think it's around 200 now. And you can measure the kind of progress. It's just amazing to me to see relatively, it's certainly online and it requires internet, but they're not using anything like Jamboard. they're using text and they're showing the results, and you have to have ways of structuring it so that you don't get all of the noise comments. So there's definitely some kind of self-organized moderation and reputation system in Polymath, but it's also the case that anybody can post to it, and they're posting quite elaborate, high level and difficult to understand arguments. I'll send you the link to the Bounded Gap Polymath project there.
We used Google Docs to do this, which is, it's kind of coarse grained, but it actually works pretty well in tracking everything. And I could see while they were writing, while this was going on, and that was kind of really intriguing to be able to watch. And the other students could too. So it added a certain kind of constraint to bring that out. But I am really interested in what happens when minds come together and come to conclusions that's what the consensus paper, they don't individually accept. And those dynamics are really kind of intriguing. It was really interesting to see 2 students who knew very little about a topic be given a prompt, and then see, freshmen or sophomores come up with senior level papers and ideas. You could really see a marked difference in the quality of the writing as well. So I'm just kicking that out there too.
So I have a question both for Rob and Tony. So we work mostly in STEM environments, so they are much more constrained in how students reason. But when you're looking at collaborative learning processes, right, there are two key things when people are working together. One is, how they pool information together. And then, as you pointed out, Tony, consensus building is really important. And of course, you all did point out that at times consensus doesn't occur. But I'm really curious to see how these processes have been tracked in different domains. Especially say when you're doing creative writing or some kind of creative thinking.
Well, and I was wondering about that a little bit because so I'm a humanist, not a social scientist. And in the world that I come from, the work that you're doing scientifically, we do as pedagogical experiments in the classroom. So I sit down and I say, what am I going to do next semester? Well, I'm going to arrange my assignments this way. I'm going to have so many, I'm going to break them into these sizes of groups. And so they're not really being tracked as genuine scientific experiments, but it's quite clear that I can see a difference in the dynamic of enthusiasm, creativity, and it might just be that they're dedicating more time to the writing process, but the quality of papers was so remarkably better that I had to repeat it. I mean, but the question, and we had metrics to come in here just to figure out, or to make sure that both writers were contributing equally. And we had ways of assessing this and so on and so forth, and some constraints put in there. But there's no doubt that it worked. What I need from my side is to be working with a social scientist in a context where we could do before and after tests to see if some of these individual skills are being transferred. We certainly made them like college, we made them like learning, and we made them like working together to innovate, but that doesn't mean they get better at it. And what I would like to do is come up with some way that we can work on collaborative writing and idea generation and come up with a way to see if it's improving. I mean, my intuition is very much so, yes, it is, but I don't have data. And I don't know if that's a theme for this kind of group. Like, how do you capture the variables of cooperation and creativity when you're looking at something that is not a STEM as concrete as teaching, maybe math or computer programming?
So I'd like to jump in and say, for the Science of Learning and Augmented Intelligence program, the fact that they are not STEM focused is not an issue. We're very interested in creativity, innovation, and as you talk about transfer of knowledge, to different contexts, adaptation, right? So.
Gabriella had her hand up, and then Danielle.
Thanks. One area, and I feel like I would lose my card if I didn't bring it up, is how we can use technology effectively in neurodiverse populations. That I haven't really heard, and that's my passion area of study and research. And I wasn't sure if it was going to come up, and I didn't want to take so much time in my first commenting phase, but technology is uniquely positioned to adapt and individualize the delivery to people with neurodivergence of any kind. And I would like to see more work in that area.
Should I go? I just wanted to applaud Tony's idea. I was thinking along the same lines of how often we are working on Google Docs in writing. And as expert writers, this is what we do now. This is what I do. It's how I write now. And I just, in the writing world, which I'm deeply entrenched, there's this notion of using writing to assess learning as well as to enhance learning. And this idea of building a tool that can track what they're doing in a Google Doc and give feedback to a teacher, but also then be able to, there's so much we could do in tracking the NLP of what they are typing in, the language that they're using, the collaborative processes. We can detect creativity in language, we can do in writing, and in using just a Google Doc platform, you can track what someone is. If we built the API, you know, what they're doing, and then to link that to both the social and creative processes as well as the outcomes in terms of learning how to write and then learning the material. I just think it's a very hot topic in terms of how students are learning from multiple documents and trying to figure that process out as a single person. But the notion of bringing minds together and helping them to learn together how to write is so much more natural than what we currently do, where we kind of put the student off in and might give them some examples, but they really have to write by themselves. There's a lot of research on peer grading, but not on peer collaborative writing. At least not research that I know about. So I just want to applaud that idea. I hope you take it up.
Yeah, another idea I thought was emerging through these discussions and also in the talks throughout the workshop is the issue of assessing collectives. Basically, whether we want to assess or evaluate a collective based on the aggregate or emergent behavior it produces, or based on averaging like individual performances. And it seems like different speakers of the workshop take on like different approaches with respect to that, either like evaluating individuals as they are augmented by some technology, such as, I don't know, maybe Jerry's talk or David Dang's talk and others, whereas some other people seem to take a more explicit approach on evaluating the collectives or teams as their own cognitive units, such as Murta or maybe Natalie Sebans and others. So, and it seems like we never had like an explicit discussion of this trade-off and when we want to take one or the other approach.
I would be interested in that as well. We actually use some pretty robust constraints on peer evaluation and multiple ways that coming at the grade so that we could bust apart the collective result into individual contributions. It's kind of tricky, but we did manage to find ways to do it. But I would love to discuss or see somebody discuss about how you come across the appraisal of individuals in a collective learning environment.
I agree, and maybe Jim, you have something related. I kind of wanted to pivot in a close area because I was really intrigued by Sudeep's comment on what level, if I understood it correctly, on what level to model collective behavior. Is this a combination of individuals, and how well do we need to model each individual's cognition or emotions to be able to model the group? And so there is always, and in my work, I always feel the tension between really understanding individual cognition well, you know, using Ektar or some of this nice architecture, or having it more as a caricature, like in the statistical physics model, where everyone has a belief and some individual preference and some social, you know, links, and then something happens, and you hope that the parameters are parameters like individual magnetic field can serve as a bucket for everything that's individual about the person. And so, of course, if you have a very detailed architecture, you can have, of course, it's somehow better on the individual level, but then quickly it becomes too complicated on the collective level, and the other way around. If you have just caricatures of individuals, are you missing something? So that tension is always something present in my work. I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
Well, I can jump in because actually that's one of the two issues that I think are kind of most fascinating to me that in the long list we have. Is attributes of the individual versus behavior of the group. I've got a paper, maybe I'll try to post it on archive and send it out to people next meeting, but also there's a lot of work being done at ETS, or there was, on individual strengths, individual abilities, and how that affects group behavior. I mean, clearly, if you're interested in assessing people's strengths and behaviors, group behavior is one way you can do that. Right, so you know, you can do research in that direction as well. Right, there's another note. I think that's a great issue, so I'm happy to keep the focus on that for a while. I had another thought, but
go ahead.
Okay, maybe let me also jump in. And I come more from a computer science background. And there is one aspect that I want to, maybe pose a question to this community. We have assumed that, somehow this AI partner, in whatever sense, that will collectively improve the system's intelligence or creativity, is benign, in that the designer of the AI knows what they're doing, and the AI is here to help people. There actually is a fair amount of concern right now among computer scientists, in the sense that, number one, you cannot always assume creators of AI are benign. But number two, even if they are, even if they have the good intention, the system they create is so complex and opaque that it might actually have unforeseeable side effect on the human partners. So these are, we have seen kind of indications of the problem in social media, where actually the social media platform is run by huge AI algorithms. That's a big black box. Nobody knows what's going on. That created, all these echo chamber effect, misinformation, and so on and so forth. So the bigger question I want to pose is, should we consider kind of cognitive guardrails that we think of that can put on AI? I know this is very hand-wavy, but somehow we can put it on AI such that it never hurt us. So that's a bigger question I want to pose at this moment. Thank you.
If I can respond to Jerry. 2 weeks ago, I was at a Dagstuhl event on finding interactions that are richly graphical. So visualization interactions, visual analytics that allow people to query each stage of the pipeline and ways of documenting levels of trust. So this is a proposed graphical language for establishing the level of trust in the areas of trust in AI as a pipeline that can be used by, some decision maker or auditor of the process to give it some kind of stamp of approval. And that brings up an issue that I've talked about before. I'm a cognitive psychologist. My career has been in design of information technologies, richly interactive information systems. To me, there has to be a bridge between these communities. My IEEE Viz Life, I was general chair, I'm on VGTC executive. There's an enormous amount of technical competence, very limited understanding of human cognition. On the other side here, I see great ideas. How do we get these ideas into some implementation? I mean, a system is nice, but a demo would be a start so that we can actually show some progress. And I'm not sure what structures there are to do this, but I see these interdisciplinary grants, these international grants, and they're quite intriguing.
So if I can jump in here, I'm glad you raised these issues, both Jerry and Brian, because this, as you get into sort of the human technology sort of aspects of things, we are very concerned, aside from sort of the more extensive discussions on privacy and intellectual property, the idea of how some of these emerging technologies or scenarios in which humans interact with technologies are going to have the unintended consequences, both on the human component and also, the subsequent use of these technologies. So, and often technology development far outpaces considerations of this sort. So, these are exactly the kinds of activities that, say, a network of networks, because of its larger critical mass of people, could engage in. And importantly, to involve at the outset ethicists and legal people too, with regard to these kinds of considerations. Not so much at the end. We often get these considerations at the end of a technology or something has happened, but to really get them involved so that they are aware and they are informed as to what goes into some of the creations of these technologies and their use. So I think that's going to be, if you're thinking of coming in for sort of the XLNet or like kinds of applications. These are kinds of things that individuals don't do very well alone, that you really need a critical mass and a network of people who are providing both the impetus and for why these kinds of ethical issues should be considered.
They're not. They don't have to be big AI issues either. This is actually, this struck me with Jerry's presentation. Was it last week or the week before last, about nudging and some concern that we had maybe 20, 25 years ago with something like Microsoft Word and its style correction. So it underlines in green where there might be an error, and the student's job becomes make the green go away. And it's not comprehending or understanding how to write. It's just, I want to make the green go away. And what happens is that the software forces certain writing patterns, certain sentence structures, and possibly in some cases, then the generation of certain kinds of ideas. So it's not just like a big AI problem. It's even a regular algorithmic problem here. But it is one I think that augmented intelligence needs to consider, because it could be making us stupider, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rob, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I thought there was somebody before me, sorry. So I did want to kind of raise a challenge. Maybe there's a building on Tony's example with collaborative writing or the Polymath kinds of projects. I think both the psychologists and the computer scientists among us, it would be great to think about tasks that really genuinely require both the human and the AI components to them. And so like some of the cyborg systems that we heard about, like from Mark Stivers and Sudip Bhatia and Jerry Zhu, I guess when I'm awake at night and I'm thinking about how humans are going to become outmoded, I had this kind of worry that for those tasks, maybe the computer should have just done it all themselves. And they're trying to give hints to these kind of stupid humans, or in Sudip's stuff, it was like you're trying to find this relation between the words positioned in a high dimensional semantic space and the value that they get, but the computer can do it like way better than people. So I'm kind of interested in people's thoughts about what would be a task where humans are probably going to be needed even in, I don't know, I don't want to predict too far in the future, but let's say in 5 to 10 years, because I would have said, oh, humans are needed for protein folding, but I guess AlphaFold proved me wrong there. And it seems like this is in some of the lines of what people were talking about in terms of genuine creativity, situations where there is this very high level vision or intentionality, but it seems difficult to me as a psychologist in coming up with tasks that humans will still be relevant for.
Are you thinking about your job security, Rob? Okay.
Is that maybe anything that has to do with actually understanding other humans, like rating speech online, what is hate speech, what is misinformation, those things that really require a lot of kind of background knowledge that we are not even aware of, about intentionality, metacognitive cues, about who to trust. This seems that there's still something there where humans are needed, or?
Well, anything with ethics. You know, people won't accept a computer telling them that, you know, their cancer is inoperable, and you know, you just, you know, the other thing is that there are these very evocative demos that we see of AI that suggest to us that it is breathing down our throats. It's almost trivial to break these AI systems when you give them stimuli they're not prepared for. And so I think we've been sandbagged quite a lot. And there was a really nice discussion going on with some of the recent Google AI efforts, where they refused to give scientists access to their technology to test it, but instead gave some blogger access who decided it was absolutely brilliant and able to replace humans any day now. So we have to keep in mind that there's financial interests, even extending to some of my professorial colleagues who have side gigs and the like. And so we are often getting sold a bill of goods.
I mean, there was discussion in this group a couple of weeks ago about dialogue models, right? And so it seems that reasoning about goals vis-a-vis other people, social relationships, so far, it seems that humans are required. Keep inferring goals from language input, that kind of thing.
I don't know the extent to which this is on topic, but after I finished the keynote for this, I had to turn my attention to a different keynote that I'm doing later, beginning of October, on the workforce. And for that, I had to read a bunch of economics papers on technology and economics. And so I learned a lot about it. And one of it had to do with the assumptions regarding the, you know, what AI can do. AI can do lower level tasks and not higher level tasks. I think a lot of the work that we're doing challenges that notion that there are, you know, given the AI is making advances in being able to do a lot of what humans do. And there's important aspects of agency. One of the interesting things that I thought that I learned had to do with the leveling off of the importance of having a tech degree. So if you have a tech degree, CS, STEM, you'll have a higher level of income immediately after graduation, but that levels off. And what's happening is that as people get older, what becomes more important are those social skills and our ability to actually collaborate and work with one another. And that's something like, this is what we're talking about, how hard it is to get AI in that process, the collaborative process, the social skills, working with one another, and ethics, of course, and agency. And so I just thought it was interesting that that translates economically to income. As people get older, the people with degrees in the social areas, not technology, start making as much money as those who have the technology degrees, which is also there's a bigger demand. There's a big demand for people with those social skills. So you're going to see a lot of talk about, you know, needing those, they call them soft skills. I hate the term non-cognitive skills, but just that something interesting I've been learning about lately.
Well, I mean, if we sort of want control over increasingly intelligent machines, it seems to me that somehow it would be nice to think that we're still in charge of the goals. You know, I brought up goals before, just inferring goals, but anyway, I mean, that's control, I think, and a loss of control is what freaks people out about this whole issue. You know, relates to what Jerry mentioned.
Is there some way to bring this talk about AI and goals back to augmented intelligence in these groups, that such that it would, like, it could be a topic?
Well, could I bring up one just other? This is kind of a boring topic, and maybe that's what you're asking for. So, I mean, there's been some talk here about augmented intelligence, and it seems to me like a continuum rather than a categorical distinction. So Rob brought up using R. Before that, there was a debate about whether kids should use calculators in their schoolwork, right? I mean, so we use tools, and the tools have a whole continuum of increasing sophistication. So I guess, when does it get interesting to us? When we're interacting with an agent, or before that? So that's just a kind of a question for the group and might guide some of our talks next term.
Yeah, this is just a side note on collaborative creativity. When I work with undergraduates on Google Docs, they'll jump in and change each other's sentences and what have you. When I try to do this with professional colleagues, there's kind of a sanctity to the text, and I can't get my co-writers to be willing to change something that I did, or they might get upset if I change something that they did. And you know, we want to try to get past this so that the collective intelligence can emerge. And it won't emerge if your players are locked into an individual mindset that says that ideas are created individually. I'm not sure that's ever true. I'm not sure that that's true outside of a non-technological context, that ideas are created individually either.
Therefore, I invite everyone to hack the Jamboard and disagree there, cross it out, what you don't disagree with. Sutya.
Well, I just want, before we close this session, to remind people that the program accepts applications not only for sort of full-fledged proposals, but if you have interesting exploratory types of project, particularly as you try to work together or with people that you may not normally work, but have a set of ideas that require sort of proof of concept. We have as a mechanism what we call the EAGR grants. I always forget it's EAGR. It's for exploratory research. I can send Rob I should know that acronym, but I keep forgetting. So these kinds of awards are up to $300K for 2 years. And I think this is going to be an important component as you try to make linkages across different areas and across scales of analysis, right? Is this something feasible to do? And do you need particular methods and in terms of analysis or even technologies to support those kinds of linkages? So
thanks, Susang. I wanted to take a stab at what Tony was asking us to do, is relate our discussion about AI to augmented intelligence. And I guess to me, the way it fits in is there's this notion in many of our talks that we've heard about complementarity between humans and machines, that they're good at different things and trying to articulate what they're good at. And one proposal, I think going along with what Jim is saying, is that humans are still keeping their eye on the prize. They're high level, they're more purpose-based, goal-based. And I think I think there's definitely something right to that. And the only tension I feel is that there's a lot of times when I feel like people get a lot of meaning from being mired in the weeds. And I don't want to turn over my driving to an automated car driver, because I get a lot of pleasure from that high bandwidth activity of actually driving or doing data analysis and creating the system with R. And in Myrta's response, she was talking about reading humans, and you could think about reading humans and making connections with humans as actually being a somewhat of an alternative to this high level goal perspective, because it could just be, you know, the little things that people do to spur each other on and to create good feelings between people, and the emotion side that people have talked about. So I think that's an interesting different perspective on what is the unique human element.
Just to elaborate on that, so you're saying there is like one is this goal control, and the other is good feeling, establishing this collaborative soft skill, or kind of making, moving the collaboration, making it go along. Those are kind of two different things. Yeah.
I think the unspoken word for this is nuance. That's the difference between humanity and artificial intelligence and augmented systems. It's nuance. We don't have a way to quantify nuance. And so machines will not replace humans in things that require nuance.
Or they will, and we'll just get by with the slop, right?
You gave me an immediate image in my mind, Tony, of this future, and it's like everything is technically perfect, but its existence, it's not actually expressive living.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if what you mean is trust. Because, I mean, when we're building an AI system, an AI system is accurate to the extent to which humans are reliable. That's just plain and simple. But you can create an AI system that is unreliable based on unreliable data, and that has nuance, because it can have, you can make it so that it gives different decisions based on different probabilities of or contexts, etc. And then, but what is the nuance? The nuance is that humans falter, humans differ between each other, and we as humans tend to trust that more or less, depending on who the human is. And so we can build systems with nuance, no problem. It's just, will humans trust it? And then the importance of agency, of control over what you do, is so important. That's a big consideration in working with teachers, in giving them control, giving them agency in decisions, and feeling like their nuance is more important. Don't want to end on that, but somebody say something.
I will save you then, even if it's just that one sentence. I do agree that there needs to be trust, but we've all seen very easily that people will relinquish control without a thought to technology, just completely across the board, no questions asked, and be perfectly happy with that life of having the decisions being made. I mean, you could be living in a neighborhood for 30 years, but if your GPS says turn here instead, you'll turn. And it might not give you the best result, but you will follow it. So there is a lot of, blurred lines there, but I definitely agree that the idea that you trust the technology is also semantics in terms of what levels, how that's expressed, what kinds of control you're willing to just not even think about versus the kind of control you want tight reins on. So it comes down to that perception of the trust or the perception of the nuance. It's the stuff that we can't put our finger on, but it's that feeling that we know that makes it the challenge and makes us human, because we have that between groups, we have that between individuals, and we have that between technology, which is why you have people who are team Android and team Apple and all of these other kinds of things. So it's interesting and it's messy all at once.
Okay, you've convinced me, Gabriela, that humans are still going to be relevant for the next 6 weeks at least. So I think this is a natural way to wrap it up on Gabriela's optimism, which I actually do agree with, despite my cynical crack. So we will begin again next week with the still open-ended content, but we will have 2 presenters. And I think this is Mitch Nathan and Ken Kadinger. Is that right, Marta? Great. Okay.
In 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe we have not, maybe we do have a break.
We have a break.
We do have a break. Okay, great. So everybody get out and take a fall walk. Okay, thank you very much for your active participation. This is a lot of fun.